All right, guys, this is the last video for the reproductive system, and my 3 kids are within earshot of this, and we're going to talk about childbirth, so we're just going to do it. So what I would want to say first off is that every pregnancy is different than the woman's previous pregnancy or the ones that she's going to have later, and the same thing goes with childbirth. Is that you could have a vaginal birth one time and the next time something goes on and you have to have a C-section, or one time it's really quick and it's over in 3 hours and the next time it's 24 hours worth of labor. So everything is different. I know there's some old wives' tales that say, well, whatever happened with your first kid is going to happen with your second and your third. And that has not been my experience nor my friends' experiences. So the first thing we got to talk about is, how does labor actually begin? And there's a couple, I should say active labor, okay? Sometimes a woman's amniotic sac can rupture, and that's when your water is breaking. And so that can cause the woman to have to go into the hospital and start to get induced, because you can lead to infection if you have your water breaking in that area open, and the baby can get sick and a bunch of different other stuff. But basically, the thing you want to pay attention to is that the oxytocin is released. We've talked about this at the beginning of the year when we talked about positive feedback. Remember, most of the time the body wants to keep you right in these certain parameters. But labor and delivery, as well as blood clotting, are the only ones that are positive feedback, where something's going to happen that's going to take your body way far away from homeostasis and then eventually bring it back. And so, because I didn't want you to feel left out, I drew this lovely picture. I mean, I'm sure your teachers are using all sorts of technology, but this is probably the best thing. So this is a picture you should be familiar with, because we did it on probably like the second day of school. Is that when mom goes into labor, this is mom, she's going to release oxytocin. Oxytocin acts on the uterus. Remember, oxytocin is a hormone. It never acts on where it is made. So it's made in the brain, goes down and affects the uterus. And what oxytocin does is start to cause the uterus to contract. Okay, remember, the uterus is a big muscle. Because the uterus is contracting, that's causing baby's head to go further down against the cervix. And that pressure against the cervix gets signaled back up to mom, and the mom releases more oxytocin, which causes the uterus to contract even more and causes baby's head to push on the cervix even more, which causes more pressure signals to be sent to mom's brain, which causes more oxytocin. So now she's got 3 times the amount of oxytocin. She's going to be having some pretty regular contractions. And the only thing that's going to stop these contractions is when baby's head is no longer pressing on the cervix. So when baby's out. So that's essentially the role of oxytocin, is that oxytocin is going to help the uterus contract, which in turn causes mom to release more oxytocin, which in turn causes the uterus to contract more, which causes mom to release more oxytocin, so on and so on. This is a weird slide. I always include it, but there's some steps there if you want to look at that stuff. So the stages of labor is probably the biggest waiting game is getting your cervix to dilate. So your cervix has to get to about 10 centimeters. And so 10 centimeters on this diagram is about the diameter of the bagel. And that's not the vagina being that big. It's the cervix, which is the opening of the uterus. The vagina will stretch out as much as possible to accommodate the baby's head and therefore the rest of the baby's body as it comes out. But basically what happens is the cervix has to get to 10 centimeters. If it doesn't, baby's not going to be able to get out. So there's sometimes when a woman might be laboring for a long time and she just never gets to 10 centimeters. And so they have to go do a C-section. There can be a lot of reasons for C-section. The baby's breech, meaning the baby's butt is down and the head is not down. It can be things that the baby's really sick, or mom's blood pressure is an issue. So a lot of different reasons why baby might have to have a C-section. And typically once you have a C-section, you continue to have a C-section. And I mean, there's just a bunch of different reasons that you might have it. And so basically the uterus is going to contract because mom is releasing oxytocin from her brain. The cervix is going to dilate. And also, in order to get baby out, you got to get the baby out of the sac, which is the amniotic sac. And that's when the water's breaking. And I will let you know that whatever you see on TV and in movies, it is completely different. Completely different. I know there's a scene from Baby Mama where I think Amy Poehler's is it that movie? I think it's that movie where Amy Poehler's water breaks and they say something like it's like a 44-ounce big gulp or something like that. It's not typically like that. Um, I'll just speak from my stories. As one of my kids, my water did break, and it felt like I just peed in my pants a little bit. So it's not like this huge, big, rush of gallons and gallons of water. And the reason why is that if you're standing up, let's go back to my lovely diagram here, not that one. If you're standing up and your water breaks, water's coming out of the vagina. Well, where does baby's head go? Baby's head goes down because gravity's pulling it down. So baby's head actually acts like a plug. So it's really not like a ton of water. Now, I do have a friend that her water broke during the middle of the night, and she said it was a lot of water. But think about if you're laying down, baby's head does not act like a plug because gravity is pulling the baby down, which would be if you're laying down on the side, pulling it this way and not straight down. And so that is a little bit of a difference. But just keep in mind that every labor and pregnancy is different from the one your mom had, the one your sister had, the one that your friend had, and it's going to be different from each one that you have. They're just completely different from each other. And so then after the dilation phase, and the dilation phase can take weeks. So once you reach, I think it's about 36 weeks, or maybe it's 35, you end up going into your OBGYN every week and they check to see how dilated you are. And so you might be 1 centimeter or 3 centimeters for weeks and weeks and weeks. And until you start to get an active labor, you're not going to get into that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 centimeter range. And so it's not something that's like, oh, you start dilating and it's over the next day. It can take a long time, which can be really frustrating for mom, her partner, her parents, whoever, just because it's just a big waiting game when you're in labor. And so the last phases are obviously getting the infant out, and that part really isn't that long. The part that takes long is getting the cervix dilated. And so once the cervix is dilated, you're going to start pushing, and hopefully you're going to push and get the baby's head out of the cervix, out of the vagina, and the rest of the body will come. And then a lot of people forget about this is you have this placenta. Remember that placenta is the endocrine organ that helps maintain the pregnancy by releasing progesterone and estrogen. So the placenta actually has to come out. And so when baby gets out, those contractions do not stop like that. Remember, your body's got all this oxytocin in it. And so it's going to keep contracting. And that's a good thing because you want the placenta to get out as well. And so the dilation you have here where you need the cervix to be 10 centimeters, baby comes out. And then once baby's out, dad or partner, whoever, will cut the cord. And then after that, the delivery of the placenta. And so the placenta will come out, and what they want, what the doctors and nurses need is they want that placenta to come out in one whole piece. If it doesn't, sometimes they do have to go in and get all the placenta out because it can cause bleeding to keep occurring, and they need bleeding to stop, obviously. And then also another unfortunate thing about after you have a baby is that you will have a period for a long time. Think about how thick that uterine wall has been for 9 months. So you do have a period for 6 to 8 weeks, no lie. That doesn't mean it's like a regular period. It doesn't mean it's going to be a period that's going to be super heavy, but you do have a period because your body has to get back to the normal. What was it like before pregnancy and labor? And so you'll get rid of all that. And then another thing that happens is after the placenta has been delivered, your uterus is 500 times its normal size. And so those contractions actually help get that uterus back down to a normal size. And so another painful part about labor is that after you give birth, a nurse is going to be pushing on your stomach to get that uterus to go back down into a somewhat normal size. And so you will keep contracting for hours and hours after you give birth to get that uterus to contract down to a somewhat normal size. Now, it'll take a long time for you to get back down to the actual normal size, but it is something that happens pretty rapidly. And so, like I said, you will have a period. You want to keep in mind that labor and delivery is a very, energy needing process. And so a woman is typically pretty wiped out after. And now you have a newborn and you got to wake up and feed the baby every couple hours and change the diapers and all that. So it is something where it's a huge learning curve, and take all the help you can get from family and friends that want to bring you food and do all that sort of stuff, but it is just kind of wipes you out, and then you got this new little thing to take care of. So another thing after labor is you can't use tampons, you can't have sex, because you're trying to make sure that that cervix gets back down to its original length or its original diameter, and the vagina has just been stretched out, so you want that to go back down to somewhat normal. And if you have a vaginal delivery, you will go back to your OBGYN about 6 weeks after you gave birth, and the doctor will check to make sure your cervix is back to normal, your uterus has shrunken down. If you've given birth via C-section, you would go back to your OBGYN and they would check your incision, but they also, again, would check your cervix and check your vagina, because even though the baby came out of your belly, it's still, your cervix still had to do some work there, and you still had your uterus that had to do some work. And so there's some differences there, but the parts were still the same. You still used your uterus, your cervix was still being used in some way, so you want to make sure those parts go back to normal. So definitely I would want to go into more with you guys having questions if we were in class, but obviously we're in a different type of scenario. So if you guys do have questions, let me know. At this point, you can go ahead and do the next part of the next lesson, which is going to be the assessment. There are 6 questions for you to answer using complete sentences. Please do not use Google to find those answers. Use what we've talked about. Use the videos, use the resources I've given you. I don't want you to use Google because sometimes it goes well above where our content knowledge is, or it's going to use terms that you don't know. So don't start talking in your answers like you haven't been talking the whole entire year. All of a sudden you become a first-year med student and you've never used those words before. It's going to be a little bit fishy. So just use the terms you've used. If you have questions, let me know. I will get information to you guys about the USI final for those that are taking it, which is most of you. But in the meantime, if you guys do have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Okay, see you guys later. Bye.